Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video, I'll be showing you how to upgrade the Gruul Stompy Pioneer Challenger deck on a budget. Our goal is to get as close to the tier 1 deck as possible without spending more than the deck's retail price, which is going for about $50 USD. The currency might not be relevant for everyone, but for context, we're roughly spending the deck's price or less. So what's interesting about Gruul is there are two top competitive decks that share the majority of the cards in your deck, and they're tuned slightly differently. So let's take a look at all three of them right here. No lands, no sideboards, no spells. Just want to look at the creatures, and you don't need to know what all these cards do yet. That's fine. I just want to demonstrate the similarities. So on the left, we have Gruul Vehicles. The middle is Gruul Aggro, and the right is your Challenger deck out of the box. You'll notice that all three decks play the same mana dorks. We've got Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves. They all have Scavenging Ooze, Bone Crusher Giant, and Lovestruck Beast. So very similar initially. The first notable difference is both of the other decks play Reckless Stormseeker. This has become a staple red creature in aggro decks, which isn't in yours. And then the final 2 or 3 cards is different for each of the decks, and they do impact how the decks are played. So your deck has Glorybringer and Chandra. This makes your deck very grindy and mid-rangey. You're trying to generate card advantage. Your Glorybringer can blow up multiple creatures over several turns. Chandra can get extra cards, can also blow up creatures. So the idea here is to create 2-for-1s and 3-for-1s and 4-for-1s depending on how long these live to sort of grind out win the resource game. Gruul Vehicles plays Esika's Chariot and Sky Sovereign. This is very similar. It's also a very mid-rangey take, although this one's focused a little bit more on attacking the opponent while generating card advantage. The Chariot is good value. It's a 4/4, makes a couple tokens, and then it can duplicate tokens, including your 1/1 tokens from Lovestruck Beast, notably, so even if the cats die, you have those. And the Sky Sovereign is very similar to Glorybringer. If we compare these side by side, very similar. It only deals 3 damage, but it does it every turn. It needs to be crude, but you can use mana dorks for that, and also Lovestruck Beasts that are stuck on defense. So comparing these side by side, they both have advantages and disadvantages. So both the Gruul Vehicles and your version are a little bit grindier. And then the aggro build is playing Werewolf Pack Leader and Embercleave. So we have cut out some of the top end for a 2-drop, an aggressive 2-drop, a 2-mana 3/3 that draws cards. And then our top end, our 6-mana big thing, is a piece of equipment that usually gets its cost reduced. We never pay 6 for this, right? We pay 2 to 3, maybe 4. And that's really the only difference between these 3 decks. And bear in mind, these are just example deck lists. If you look at like 5 or 6 different Gruul Vehicles decks, none of those will be the same, right? There's lots of variations even within each of these archetypes, but they're all very similar. They use the same core deck, the same mana dorks, the same adventure creatures, Bone Crusher Giant, Lovestruck Beast. They all use Scavenging Ooze. So there's a core deck here that you have, and you can kind of go in either direction. If you want to go more aggressive, you're basically cutting out Glorybringer and Chandra for Embercleave and Werewolf Pack Leader to make it a little bit leaner, a little bit faster, or you're cutting them for the vehicles if you want to go that route. And we could talk more about this, but there's stuff that we can change regardless of which direction you want to go. First, we can take out a Scavenging Ooze for a Reckless Stormseeker. So this is a staple red aggro creature, and not many decks play the full 4 Scavenging Oozes. Most play 3, some go down to 2. I saw a few that completely cut them from the main board and went sideboard. I think it's a little bit dangerous. There's lots of graveyard combo decks, and Scavenging Ooze is so good. It's awesome to have graveyard hate main board, and it doesn't suck, right? So that's great, but 4 is excessive. We can do 3. Reckless Stormseeker is more traditional, very common, very good in aggro decks. And if we take a quick look at the decks now, they're similar, but something's not adding up, and that's that we seem to have less cards, right? Why don't we have 4 Reckless Stormseekers? We don't have room for them, right? And that's because your deck has too many spells. If we look at the spells and the sagas and whatnot, the Vehicles deck has 5 spells, the aggro deck has 4, and yours has 7. It's a little bit high, so I think we can take out 2 Abrades and 1 Mizium Mortars for 3 Reckless Stormseekers. This helps fix that ratio problem. We still have plenty of removal. We still have 4. We have a playset of removal spells. But remember, we have Bone Crusher Giant, which has Stomp, and we still have Glorybringer, which is a removal spell sort of. It deals 4 damage. It blows something up if you exert it. So there's still plenty of removal, but this gets the ratio a little bit more correct and a bit more typical for what you see in competitive decks. And the reason I'm leaving 1 Abrade in, even though that's atypical, most decks don't play like a single Abrade, but that's because they usually have Boseiju in the mana base. Unfortunately, this is a $33 card, so in our case on a budget, instead of playing 4 Mizium Mortars, I think we just play 3 Mortars and 1 Abrade. That gives us that main board artifact hate, and it's still fine. I think that's a perfectly reasonable compromise, unless you want to go out and get that $33 land, or if you just opened one, that's great too. So now if we take a quick look at the decks, our deck is looking much more in line with these other decks, and at this point, it's really just a matter of preference on your part. Do you want to go more aggressive with Pack Leaders and Embercleaves, or do you want to go into the vehicle deck, which is actually the most popular version of the deck? So basically you're looking at 4 Glorybringers, 2 Questing Beasts, 2 Chandras, and you can take those out for Pack Leaders, Embercleaves, or Chariots and Sky Sovereigns. At that point, you basically have the main board of a tier 1 deck. So currently, Esika's Chariots are $7.50 each. Roughly, I'll put the exact prices on screen, and these Sky Sovereigns are about $4. So if you go this route, you're looking at about $40 to $50, which would actually be like perfectly on budget for us. And for the aggro deck, the Werewolf Pack Leaders are $3.50 or so, and the Embercleaves are $13 each, so you're looking at upwards of 60 plus for that deck. And considering the fact that the vehicle deck is both cheaper and it's the more popular deck in the metagame right now, it's currently a tier 1 deck. It's in like the top 10 decks or so. So if you go that route, you're looking at a cheaper deck and something that's closer to the tier 1 deck right now. And if you want to go that way, you just take out 3 Glorybringers, add in 3 Sky Sovereigns. These are very, very similar. The Sky Sovereigns are just a little bit more popular. They hit every turn. They deal damage every turn. They hit pretty hard. 6 power in the air plus 3 damage. And that happens every turn as opposed to every other turn with the Glorybringer. And then you could take out the 4th Glorybringer and 2 Questing Beast for the 3 Esika's Chariots. These are expensive, but it gets you closer to that tier 1 deck. And technically, you should probably take out the last Chandra for the 4th Chariot. I personally like Chandra too much, and it's also technically getting us a little bit out of budget. So I'm just keeping 1 Chandra in because I like it. Chandra's great. If you saw my gameplay video, it literally won us a game. It was pretty awesome. So, yeah, moving on to the mana base, naturally there are tons of expensive lands we could add. You know, we've got shock lands, we've got pathways. These are usually played and they're kind of expensive. Pathways are the cheaper of the two. It's only a few dollars each. Could probably add a couple of those. Stomping Grounds, you're looking at $13 to $15 each. Fortunately, you did get one in your deck, so that's a good start. The deck also usually plays 1 copy each of Boseiju and Den of the Bugbear, and both of these are also very expensive. Worth mentioning though, if you happen to have one, you only need 1 of each. You can add those if you want in the place of basic lands of the same colors. Forest for Boseiju, Mountain for Den of the Bugbear. But all this is too expensive, but what we can afford is 2 copies of Lair of the Hydra. We can happily take out 2 Forests for 2 of these. These are only a couple dollars each, looking at $4 to $5, and they can be game winning. Having this massive Hydra that you can animate, use your mana dorks to pump a bunch of mana into it, make it huge, can sometimes win games against like control decks and stuff. I also think it's worth taking out a mountain for a Sakenzin. This is legendary, but 1 copy doesn't hurt. It doesn't enter tapped. Adds red mana just like the mountain, but if you're flooded, it can be channeled for a couple of 1/1s. It's nice to have. I wouldn't say this is like 100% necessary, but it's a nice bonus. It literally doesn't hurt at all to have it in your deck, and sometimes that's relevant. The sideboard of this deck is actually pretty solid. I was pretty impressed. It has a lot of key pieces. The big issue I think is Flame Blessed Bolt and Cindervine. So Flame Blessed Bolt isn't typically played. It is relevant because the exile effect is useful, and Cindervine is usually played. This is a very popular card, usually only like 2 or 3 copies. A full 4 is kind of weird, but I don't think it's too big of a deal. But if you want to, I would say you could probably take out at least 2 Flame Blessed Bolts for the 2 abrades that we took out of the main board. Having these just in case we need either more removal or a way to blow up artifacts is nice, and I don't think you absolutely have to take out Cindervines, but in the future, if there is a card that you want to add to your sideboard, maybe you have a specific deck you want to try to hate out, Cindervines is like your flex spot. You can take out 1 or 2 of those. If you have like a blue-white control deck that's giving you problems, you know, Fry could go here. If you need more graveyard hate, maybe Scavenging Ooze isn't enough. Maybe you put the 4th Scavenging Ooze in the place of the 4th copy of Cindervines, just so you can have a better chance of getting that if necessary, right? I don't think it's absolutely necessary to go out right this second and replace the 4th Cindervines, but if you're looking for a spot, one of those would be like the first cut if you need to make room. And that's it, guys. That's it for my upgrades. There's still plenty of room for improvement, right? Particularly in the mana base, but this deck was shockingly close to the tier 1 deck. It's also very close to multiple competitive decks, both the aggro and the vehicles version, so it doesn't really take much to complete it. As you saw, we changed just a few cards, but hopefully that arms you with the knowledge to go forward. You know, you can kind of pick and choose your own route, and hopefully that was useful in understanding the different builds of this deck. So yeah, be sure to check the description. I'll leave the complete deck list to my, you know, quote unquote official recommendations, the official deck list. But hopefully you can also decide for yourself which version of the deck you prefer. So hopefully that was useful. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.